What's going on, folks? We are on our preseason duty to make sure that we keep this show going. And Mark Mancini is doing Mark Mancini things, and we congratulate him and send him love and appreciation because he's out doing Angel stuff and Lakers stuff and all kinds of things. So we are recording this a day early, and it will be out on Wednesday. Don't worry, we will be on schedule for the rest of the season, I promise you. And we're gonna have our pick'em show coming up very soon on Fridays. So you guys can tune in and see uh, who knows what they're talking about, who doesn't, because the pick'em show is actually one of our favorite things that we do as a group here, and we can't wait for it to start. And third week of the preseason has just started, and the third week of the preseason is when people have their quote unquote dress rehearsals. But some of the teams that we are most interested in did not have a dress rehearsal because they're worried about their offensive lines. And I think that's something that's kind of new this year. So we're going to start in just a second. So I want to welcome in our family because we have the old school guys. The guys have been around since 2016. The guys have been around forever. Mark Hirsch as well as Baltimore Blaine. So why don't we go in reverse order? Baltimore Blaine, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, thank you, sir. Uh, I've been around since 2016. That makes me a young
Well,
pup, right?
this show, you and I have been around since 2013 on this show, but on this particular show. And how you doing, Mr. Mark Hirsch?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much. And so let's quickly go back. Last week, we talked a little bit about some of the rule changes and how the referees were going to present them and how they're going to, maybe be a little bit overzealous in the preseason, and they're going into a meeting to talk about how they're going to present those rules from after that meeting forward, and if it was going to ruin the NFL season. And I think that we found that they haven't. So, real quickly, what do you guys see? We'll go to Mr. Hirsch and then to Baltimore Blaine. I think that they did a good job, actually. My personal opinion.
Well, I suspected that the approach they were going to take was they have a new rule and nobody knows how to enforce it. And as I said last week, the reason for every new rule is that there's a reason for it. And the new rules that they've been coming out with have been designed to reduce injuries, serious injuries to players. And the problem is if you enforce the rule literally, every instance of any type of infraction of the rule, maybe you're not always really preventing injuries, but you're just creating penalties and all kinds of chaos on the field. And I think it takes a while for the officials to really get in the swing of how to use a rule to achieve its intended purpose. And I think there was a lot less flag dropping last week for the new rules. And I think that what's going on is the officials are getting used to it. The players are getting used to it. So, as I suspected all along, no big deal.
Well, I think that's you're right. It's a lot of, and also that there's a lot of with any new rule, first seasons of a new rule. This one seems to have several to keep your eye on. The most complicated one is the helmet rule, leading with the helmet, where they haven't been able to interpret it all correctly all the time. I constantly see it still bent towards the defense more than the offense. And they'll get that, or hopefully they'll get that all straightened out. The kickoff rule is another one that I was curious about, where all the kickoff the team has to have their both feet on the ground when the ball is kicked. I still, just from my point of view of watching some of these games, I saw that not being called when it should have been called on several games. Which one else? What were we talking about? Well, we're still waiting for the national anthem thing to straighten out, which will not be straightened out. So that drama will be played out throughout the whole season.
So before I jump on to like, I'm not gonna be a political guy. Don't worry, guys. I'm not gonna make this uncomfortable for anybody. But Blaine, Tucker, what happened?
Well, I'm not worried about it at this point because Tucker missed kicks last preseason. I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is that a lot of these times, I mean, and this is with quarterbacks and with skilled position like this. These players are working on different things, just like in baseball, where you have a pitcher in spring training who is working on new pitches, working on different mechanics or what have you. I'm not worried about what goes on in the preseason with Justin Tucker. I think that Justin Tucker will be reliable once he once that season starts. You won't be seeing him taking some of these kicks like the one that he took a couple of weeks ago from 60-something yards and missed it. You won't be seeing those kind of things in games. It's just like as far as the coaching is concerned, where you're going for it on fourth down every time. Where in the game you wouldn't, you wouldn't take those chances. You're just trying to get that practice that underway. So I'm not really worried about Justin Tucker. He'll come back on a solid with his leg during the season. He's the least of my worries on that team.
Well, what are the most of your worries then?
Sorry about that mute button. Go ahead. I was talking to the space.
I'm worried about mute buttons.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Harris. I'm sorry.
No, I was just asking Blaine. He said that was the least of his worries, and I said, "What were the most of your worries?" Because I abhor silence.
Yeah. And that's actually kind of a good question. So let me set you up a quick. Actually, I'm going to set you both up because it's something that both of you have in common. Is I totally understand. Hey, you know what? If you believe in certain players, don't have them play in the preseason, right? But both of your teams. So we'll go you Blaine first, and then we'll go to Mr. Hirsch. There's a difference between protecting a player that you don't need to see and bubble wrapping a player, and then bubble wrapping players that really need it. Now, Mr. Hirsch is going to get to do a little victory lap on those two rookie corners that have looked fantastic. But all of the running backs, wide receivers, and everything look horrible. Now, we'll let him get to that in a second. We'll let him stew on that for a quick bit. Baltimore Blaine, I mean, it's like, really? Your defense has been awesome, but your offense, like, no one's playing. Like, we haven't seen anything, and we're going into the fourth week. Like, what? Please explain to us what the thought process is.
Well, you're not seeing Joe Flacco's only in there for as long as he needs to be. And I think that's smart because you're keeping him out of harm's way and fresh for the season. He's been doing what he needs to do as far as scoring drives. I think the last game it took him a couple of possessions before they actually did score. But the main thing is that you want to keep him fresh. You put and also you're putting him up against a lot of these. And this is one thing about this preseason, guys. That I mean, is it me or is it? It just seems weird because a lot of the teams aren't playing their starters on a regular basis. You had the Rams and not play their starters for like a lot of key players for like 2 or 3 games. And I know that
The
when
whole
the
damn
Ravens played,
preseason. No, Todd Gurley has not played the whole damn preseason.
exactly. And so I'm that when you talk about the bubble wrapping, I don't know if it's a new philosophy of keeping the players from injury or and I can understand that if it is, if the coaches think that they're okay, and they're ready to go, and that they're not going to have a problem as far as executing plays in a game. I'm all for that, and I think that's part of what's going on with the offense with the Ravens. I think they want to give Lamar Jackson and RG3 the majority of the reps and as many snaps as possible, especially Lamar Jackson, to bring him along and condition him for the NFL difference between NFL and college.
So let's pass it to Mark Hirsch real quick. But can I just say that even though nobody watched the end of the last game from the Ravens, that RG3 looked like a super legit quarterback. Like a super legit quarterback. And I've been one of the biggest critics of RG3 since after the first year. And he looked like a super legit, like well positioned, intelligent, athletic quarterback.
And he had a touchdown pass that was dropped late in that game, and and he's had a couple of passes that were dropped by rookie receivers and third string or second string players. I think he's
and for me, Baltimore Blaine. When I look at the preseason, I look at like people that when you get to the second half of preseason games, people look like, okay, that guy is obviously an athlete that is just head and shoulders better than everybody else on that field, and that's what he looked to me. That's how he looked to me. Excuse me. He looked like he was someone that just ran faster, threw harder, was smarter than anyone else on that field.
He's a legitimate quarterback. That's either if the Ravens don't keep three quarterbacks, which I think they should, he will get a starting, maybe not a start. He'll get a backup role somewhere and probably take over as a starter in the next couple of years.
Well, I want nothing but the best for that guy. And sorry, Mr. Mark Hirsch, we kind of stomped over your time. So why don't you go ahead and take it? And then after you're done, we're gonna get into what I think is the best division in football, which is the NFC North, which is obviously something that you know a lot about. So, do you have any thoughts on what we were just talking about as far as the preseason games? And then after that, we're gonna get into the Detroit Lions.
Well, I don't know if the term bubble wrapping, I guess that's an assumption that we can make, but I think there's another reason to do this, and that is that coaches want to get to see their draft picks, they want to get to see their second string going, they want to try out some of their second and third string wide receivers because, as we all know, it's a long season, and these guys might get called up. And there's a big difference for these guys that don't have a lot of playing time under their belt between the practice field, even with the pads on, and the preseason games, which are a little more realistic than the training camp stuff. So I would think if I was a coach, I would want to get a look at some of my new players. I would want to give some of my guys that have been sitting in backup positions in previous years some time on the field to limber them up, and to get a good look at how they're doing so that if somebody is injured, I know who's the one to send in. So I don't think it's all about bubble wrapping. I think it's about strategy on the coach's side, whether they want to get a good look at some of their talent that isn't likely to get much work, or, some of the teams are playing their starters a lot. And these are teams where the coaches, I would think, obviously think that these guys need to get up and running. So I don't consider it to be bubble wrapping. There's always an issue about why bother to get injured in the preseason. I get that. That makes sense. But at the same time, you got to put a team together and be ready to go for the season. And one of the things that a head coach has to think about is who's next in line, and trying to get a look at it, because every one of these teams has more than one person waiting in the wings for any particular position. And it makes good sense to get a look at these guys, to get them out there playing and see who's going to be the cream of the crop if somebody goes down.
I want to give a bunch of credit to Evan Silva, who, if anyone out there is listening who doesn't have Twitter or Facebook, if you want to just do Twitter for to follow sports, follow Evan Silva because he is the sharpest guy. He is the senior editor at Roto World, which is NBC's Roto World. He's a fantasy guy. He does real football. He also works with Evan Sharp, who's probably the sharpest better on as far as the Vegas side goes, and they work as a team. The only reason I bring him up is because he brought up something that is so smart. And after watching the NFL for 30 years, yes, I did say 3-0. That's how old I am. It makes me sad, but it's true. He brought up something that said, I can tell you exactly who's going to make the team. Maybe he paraphrasing just a little bit, but what he said is that the guys who are on the punt kickoff team, both receiving and obviously sending the punts and kicks, don't change, and those are the people that 95% of them stay on the team. And it was such an obvious smack in the face to me, like, duh, those are the guys that want to be on the team, and because of the fact that what changes after you get past the first 30 players that are your core players is the people that are going to be able to contribute on special teams, and those guys don't change in the preseason. And I just thought, I'm watching football. I speak to different people who ask me, advice on fantasy, and we also have obviously this, the podcast here, and it's such an obvious thing. And I started watching the preseason games with a complete new view, and watching the fact that the same guys play on special teams every kickoff, and those are the guys who are going to make the team. So that's it. I just wanted to, give him props and say a little something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. I wanted to commend what Mr. Hirsch just said and add something to it, if I may. Good points, Mr. Hirsch, about having these guys showcased and being able to evaluate the other talent on the team. I want to take it one other thing that I've noticed is that I think that as far as that is concerned, to take it one step further, I think they're advertising these players for trades more this season, it seems like. And I know that the Ravens just made a trade with one of their outside linebackers, Carmele Correa, and they traded him to the Titans for a pick for next year. And I just think the whole approach, the mindset, maybe I'm paying more attention now to preseason than I used to, but I don't remember seeing this kind of activity going on. So that's all I want to say. Mr. Hirsch, great points.
Well, you're very welcome, Baltimore Blaine. So, what's next, Chris Rose?
Yeah, so sorry about that once again. Like I gotta get better with this. I guess I'm in my own preseason kind of space where I keep having the mute button on. I apologize. So real quickly before we get into the AFC North, we'll go to Mr. Hirsch first and then Baltimore Blaine, because this is a person that we have talked about a bunch. Teddy Bridgewater. People have talked about how they're putting him out there for trade bait. And I'm just happy the fact that he looks healthy and looks good. I'm watching people like Miami. I'm watching people like the Jets. I'm watching other teams where, obviously, on the Jets, he's going to be, second or third place. But there's a ton of other teams that need him. And I think that, we're not going to talk about the Kaepernick stuff anymore because it's not a political thing. It's just he hasn't played in years. I think that Teddy Bridgewater has shown that every time he gets in, he is better than 14, 15 of the other quarterbacks in the league. Where do you think that he could be the best used? And I think that, there's a lot of teams that could really use him. So why don't you guys tell me where you think he should go first? Because no offense to either of you, but I think he's better than both of your second team quarterbacks. Obviously, Baltimore, just used the first round draft pick, so they're not going to use him. But I think that he's better than Kaiser. I think he's better than Hunley. What do you guys think?
Well, I agree with you on that. I was just thinking, my first thought when you started bringing up the name again was Teddy who, and the guy, he's a giant unknown. But I then the next thing I was thinking is, he'd make a good number 2 quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. But the problem with that is that I think that the Packers need to get somebody as a number 2 quarterback who's going to be groomed and ready to take over the team. And I don't know if that's Teddy Bridgewater after Aaron Rodgers is gone. I think it's going to have to be somebody in the future. And I think it would really be limiting to Teddy Bridgewater to whatever chances he has to be anything in the NFL again to go to a team and end up as a backup. But, yeah, that's where I'd like to see him.
Blaine?
I can see him in Denver.
There you go. Miami
I can see him.
is my pick. I think that he's
Miami,
better,
yeah.
personally.
Yeah, I can see Miami. I can see the Packers definitely as well. Washington, Arizona. I mean, so he's got there's a good number of places that he can find a job and possibly take over the starting position. I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm not no slight to Case Keenum and the rest of the group, but I mean, Case Keenum is in Denver hasn't been. I mean, we don't know how that's going to pan out. This is a new team, new personnel, just like Kirk Cousins, as I'll get into with the Vikings. I have some questions about.
So let's go. So let's go there. So I'm going to start with. I'm going to kind of launch some things. I don't know. I'll pass it to Mr. Hirsch, and then we'll go to you, Baltimore Blaine, and then I'll kind of close it off. So let's go to the Vikings to start off with, and I have to backtrack just a little bit. I was a big Case Keenum guy, and I was just kind of caught up in that whole deal. And we've had like our break in the off season, and I realized that I think I was a little bit wrong because I came after Cousins a lot and kind of called them bad, and I focused, which were actually legitimate stories about him padding his stats on out patterns and stuff with the Redskins. But I also have to remind myself that I always talk about stats and fantasy and stuff and how the NFL is only a 16-game season and how one season does not really mean a lot. Hockey plays 80 something, baseball 160 something, basketball 80 something games. So it's like a very small sample size. And I got to admit the fact that Cousins has done stuff year after year after year, and Case has only done it once. And so I have to kind of check myself and saying that, you know what, maybe it wasn't the worst thing that the Vikings got rid of Case and got Kirk Cousins on the team, because he has done it over and over and over again. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking. So let's go into the Vikings now. Let's start our AFC North coverage. So we'll go to Mr. Hirsch just after me. To me, I think that this is a Super Bowl level team. The defense is, we'd always talk about zero-sum gains. And what they've done is basically put on the same, I'm sorry, NFC, not AFC. I apologize. Sorry about that, guys. The Chargers are in Los Angeles, not San Diego, as some of our listeners told us many times. We are talking about the NFC North. Packers, Bears, Vikings, as well as what's that other team? I forget. Oh, the Lions. Yeah. We're gonna get to them in just a little bit, but we're gonna start off with a team that I think is probably going to go to the Super Bowl. So I'm gonna get to my reasons why after we start with Mr. Hirsch. Mr. Hirsch, why do you think the Vikings? Because once again, in my mind, a zero-sum gain is you take away something or add something, or else you start new. And the Vikings have kept their core of all-star players, Pro Bowl players together and added. And I have no reason to think that they're not going to be at the top. And I think that the AFC is garbage. As I've talked about before. So sorry, I don't mean to. I don't mean to, tell you exactly what to say, but that's what I'm.
Well, how am I going to argue with that? I think the Vikings have kept their very strong team in place for the most part. I disagree with you about Kirk Cousins. I think he's got something to prove. I think that, and this is why I could care less about fantasy football, because you can have a quarterback on your fantasy football team that makes you a winner week after week after week, while his own team he's really playing for languishes at the bottom of their division. And I think there's more than just technical ability and stats. And I agree with you that Kirk Cousins was the expert at padding his stats with dinking and dunking. But there's also a part of the game that's called heart and leadership and the ability to drive your team forward and make them winners with whatever they have. And I don't know if Kirk Cousins has that or not. And that's what this season is going to be about for the Vikings, is finding out what Kirk Cousins is made of. Because we know the rest of the crew, they've got excellent running backs. They've got great receivers. That Thielen is something else. So really it's on Kirk Cousins. And we just don't know. And, be honest with you, that's what I liked the most about Case Keenum, is that he came in under bad circumstances and got his feet wet, and he drove that team forward, and he drove that team forward, and he drove that team forward. A good example of it was that last-minute pass against the Saints that took them out. This was, spectacular, and it's the signature of somebody that's got the heart to be in the situation and reach down deep and pull out something that's going to move the team forward, instead of walking away and saying, well, everybody's fantasy teams that I was on, did great, but my team didn't win. And so I think Kirk Cousins has a lot to prove. If the Vikings management picked him only on his stats, I think that they were taking a big risk, and we'll see if it pans out or not. That's not to say that he's not going to rise up to the top and do the job, but what it is to say is that we have nothing to go on as far as evidence to make a call on that one way or the other. Blaine?
Yeah, good call. As far as Kirk Cousins is concerned, I'm concerned about, first of all, I'm still trying to see why the upgrade or so-called upgrade from Case Keenum. Here you had a quarterback that was in the system, that knew the system, the personnel, and now you're bringing in a guy from another team who has to learn not only the personnel but the system. I'm gonna tell you this Vikings team's offensive line has taken some hits. Pat Elflein, ankle and shoulder, the center, he's out. So they acquired Brett Jones from the Giants, but he was clearly being beaten out for the job in New York. So, but he does bring versatility, because they also have Nick Easton, who was the guard who was out, left guard, who's out with a neck injury, looks like, for the season. And also, I don't know how healthy the right guard, Mike Rimmers, is. So Here you are now. You're bringing in a pocket passer in Kirk Cousins, who needs that offensive line to be solid. Case Keenum is a better scrambler. He could extend plays, and he had a lot of big plays downfield to win games last season, extending the play. I really don't feel good about this Vikings team repeating as division winners here. I think they're going to take a step back. Cousins, right now, his connection's good with Stephon Diggs, but he's struggling with Adam Thielen and Kyle Rudolph as far as getting on the same page with them. Yeah, I mean, which is to be expected. Now, will that iron out this season? Maybe, we have to look past this season for Kirk Cousins to really shine in this offense. But I think this team is going to take a step back. You got a new coordinator, you got a new quarterback. It just doesn't bode well for me. Not to mention that I believe their schedule is a hindrance as well.
Can you look up the schedule real quick, Baltimore Blaine?
I can.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to talk about something because I think that people have not focused enough on the change of coordinators around the NFL. Some of them don't matter. Like, my team, the Seahawks, they brought in a new defensive coordinator who worked under Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll was doing this whole thing. Not a big deal. But when you're talking about the coordinators in a team like Minnesota, that's huge. Huge. And it's a great point that you made because that's huge. Mark Hirsch, the fact that, they got rid of one of the worst defensive coordinators in the NFL over and over and over and over again. And it's showing in the preseason. If I was a Packer fan, by the way, so we're not gonna get the Packers just quite yet because I think that they finished second in the division. So I'm gonna give you a chance to tell me why I'm wrong. I think that the Vikings are absolutely on fire. I do want to say that I have not seen a preseason rookie group, not just one rookie, but a rookie group, look as impressive as your corners and safeties looked over the last few days.
Well, I think let's talk about coordinators. So Dom Capers is gone. An old school guy. He had some success somewhere, sometime. And now we've got Mike Pettin in. And he brings a whole new defense. We've got a nose tackle now. And if you look at his stats, when he was with the Jets, he never was out of the top 10 defenses in all of the NFL with his team defense, defensive squad. And sometimes he was in the top 5 and even as high as the 3rd best defense. So obviously he's going to bring something to the Packers. I think the players themselves were getting tired of the Dom Capers scheme, and I think that they're excited, and that always bodes well for a team. And the defense is very important. It's a team game, and it's not a good situation to always be playing catch-up ball. Or even if you get ahead by a couple scores, the other team is catching up to you and making you scramble at the finish. And that's what's been happening with the Packers over and over and over again. So I think the switch of coordinators is good. As far as the rookie cornerbacks go, I couldn't be happier. Josh Jackson had a pick 6. It was called back because of a penalty, but he still had a pick 6, and it looked good. And Jerry Alexander had a pick himself. The 2 rookie guys that I was so high on, they both had picks in the last preseason game, and not only that, but they defended the pass very well. So
I don't mind. I don't mind patting myself and you as well, Mr. Hirsch, on the back because we talked about those 2 corners prior to the draft, and when Green Bay got him, we said, "Hey, you know what? Awesome!" And we pat ourselves on the back. And they look, you can tell immediately, they look like veteran players. So Baltimore Blaine, I know we've talked about the fact that you like Humphreys and you're over the fact they got Humphreys instead of Howard. But what I want to ask you about really quickly before we get to the next teams in the NFC North is your defense looks awesome. Do you think that the Lions and the Bears are on that same trajectory?
The Bears, I can see as they have that defense mindset. That's the strength of that team, if you ask me. Um, the Lions are just the opposite. They're relying still on too much on Matt Stafford's arm to get them through. Real quick before we move on, though, I did bring up the schedule for the Vikings. We have they open against San Francisco, then they play Green Bay on the road. Okay, then they play in week 4 and 5 back-to-back road games, Rams and Eagles. And then when you get to week 8, they're hosting New Orleans. So you could see in that first half, I could see 5 losses easily with this team. Now they're probably not going to lose all 5 of those games, but then they're not going to win all those games that we think that they should win either. That's just the way it pans out. So you go into the second half, and the only 2 teams that are really I question is again they're hosting Green Bay and back to back, and then follow up on the road with New England. So we're looking at a team that could be 7 losses this year, easily.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I apologize, I forgot that I asked you that, and thank you for bringing that up because that is so sharp and completely changes everything that we're talking about because it is true. I mean, the schedule is a huge deal, and the NFC North, NFC West have horrible, horrible schedules this year. And thank you very much for bringing that up, Wayne, because that's 100% correct. And there's no way to put it out. And the fact that you brought up that they're gonna have a bunch of games on the road in the beginning. So not only do they have to beat teams that are better than them as we look at the preseason, they have to beat them on the road. And I thank you for bringing it up, Blaine, because that is hugely important, especially when you guys listen to us. If you want to find us at Nuckpods, KNUCKPODS on Twitter as well as Facebook. You can follow us, and we're going to do the NFC West in a couple of weeks and the AFC West next week. And the reason I bring those up is because of the fact that they have some of the most difficult schedules in the league. And the fact that Detroit has to play people in bad weather places that are good against the pass is huge. So thanks again, Blaine. So let's go to the Bears. And when I go to the Bears, I want to say something. I'm happy for you, Kevin White. Kevin White is a guy that was drafted way too high in the draft by a bad regime for the Bears a few years ago. And then he has had injury after injury to a point where he had to learn how to run. We actually ran a story on that on this show last year. And the fact that he caught touchdowns and he's doing stuff, I'm really, really happy for that guy. Their offensive line is doing well. Roman is a great defensive coordinator. I think the only coach worse than Jeff Fisher probably was Fox. And just watching him destroy that team, it's just so, so sad. And I think that team, and for those of you who follow us as far as our Pick'em show goes, we're going to have our picks up on the Pick'em show. You guys can reach The reason why I won last year is because I picked the Bears at home against the spread over and over again. That's the reason I won. And I think that they're really going to do good. And I want to say this, that we're going to bring in Mr. Hirsch right now. I think that the NFC North is going to have 3 teams in the playoffs. That's my hot take for the year. So go ahead, Mr. Hirsch.
Well, first of all, I don't think there's going to be 3 teams from the NFL or from the NFC North in the playoffs. There's only 2 wild cards. Obviously, what you're saying is that the division winner is going to be in the playoffs and that an NFC North team is going to take both of the wild cards. And come on, you got to take a look at least at the NFC South as being viable candidates for one of the other wild cards. What about the Saints with Drew Brees and his running back crew? What about the Falcons? What about the Panthers? I just don't think that they're going to be on the same caliber. They're of a higher caliber than who would probably be the third wild card from the NFC North, which would be the Bears. I don't think they're going to go that far this year. In fact, I picked them for being third in the division, above Detroit and behind the Packers and the Vikings, who are going to have a shootout. But I think I have a good feeling about the Bears, despite the fact that they're the arch enemies of my home team, the Packers. I think the Bears are on the rise. And I think there's a number of things that contribute to that. I think it's the coaching change is the key element. I think the fact that Trubisky has got blooded last year and he's ready to move forward. The Bears have a decent core of receivers between the tight ends and the wide receivers. They've got a good running back core and a good defense. So I think the Bears are going to end up above the Lions. I think Trubisky is going to start coming into his own, but I don't think they're going to end up in the playoffs.
So real quickly, we'll pass over to you, Blaine, and then we'll let Mr. Hirsch, answer afterwards, because I think he brings up a great point. You've heard me talk about the fact that I think the NFC is head and shoulders above the AFC, but that's what it comes down to. And I know that Mr. Hirsch isn't a big fan of the fantasy deal, but what fantasy analytics do is help people understand the fact that, okay, someone has to win. It's like when people talk about, oh, these 5 receivers on the same team are going to do great. Well, no, actually, mathematics dictate that there's only going to be 300 and something targets, and you can't pick 4 different people to have over 100 targets and over 50 catches. That's not. It's just a fantasy thing. That's just you being a fan and being dumb, right? So what Mark Hirsch says is correct, but I can't think of, and please, Blaine, tell me where I'm wrong. I said that I think that there might be 3 teams from that division. I think 2 teams is totally. I almost bet the house on that, because I can't think of other teams that are better than the Packers and the Vikings not making over 10 wins. And the fact that if you're going to pick a team that's going to randomly, win maybe a few more games than they should, it's going to be a team with a quarterback. And I think Detroit and possibly Trubisky with the new offensive coordinator, I think that they can beat everyone in the AFC. So tell me why I'm wrong.
Okay, I'm going to stay with what Mr. Hirsch said. There's too much competition from the other divisions. That NFC South was a good point, Mr. Hirsch. That if anybody's going to send 3 teams to the playoffs, that's the division that'll do it. I want to also keep, and we'll get into this division a little later, a little further down the road. NFC West. Rams and my team to watch, the 49ers. So I don't think you're going to get 3 teams. I don't think you're going to get the Bears or the Lions into the playoffs so easily without somebody has to make a major stumble. And as far as the Vikings,
did you say the 49ers, or did you mean to say the Seahawks?
I'm sorry.
Did you mean to say the Seahawks, or did you say the 49ers? I'll give you a chance to correct yourself.
I'll correct myself down the road when we get to that division. Okay. But very good. But my biggest concern and my biggest red flag on this team, to prove it to me, is Mitchell Trubisky ready to take the step up? Is he going to lead this team? Is he what they need under center to get this offense to stop relying on the defense to win games? Now, here's one thing I wanted to point out to you, is that the tight end position is thin. Zach Miller is on reserve pup list with a knee injury. He's expected to miss the whole season. Adam Shaheen, is out indefinitely with a foot injury, so we don't know how far into the season that might go, or if he'll be ready for week one. And behind him, you really don't have an option. I mean, well, you got Trey Burton. He's the only option at tight end. So I just don't feel this team is ready this year to make that step. And until Mitchell Trubisky shows me that he is the real deal, which he hasn't shown at all since he's gotten that starting job, or since he's been on this team, I'm just not a believer. I would say that I'm really torn between whether the Lions or the Bears is going to be in the basement here, and I will get to the Lions. But the whole thing is that the Bears were in the basement last season, and I don't see them moving out of the basement from what I've seen so far.
Well, Blaine, I think that the Bears are definitely going to take a step up. And the difference between the Bears and the Lions is that the Bears have a defense, and they're not going to be so far in the hole, and they're not going to have to start relying on the quarterback airing it out and then getting intercepted like it happens to Stafford all the time. And also, the other critical factor is in coaching. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the Lions, because that's, I think, one of the big deficits of the Lions team is their new coach that they got courtesy of the New England Patriots. But I see Trubisky having a solid unit that is going to be able to allow him to take a step forward. I don't think he's going to end up in the playoffs. I don't think he's going to end up being a superstar next year. But I think he's on an upward trajectory, and the Bears did much better than I thought they would do last season, even though they ended up in the basement. So I don't have any hesitation in saying that I think the Bears are going to finish above the Lions. Are they going to win 10 games? I don't think so. Are they going to end up in the playoffs? I don't think so. But I think they're going to be a solid third position in the NFC North.
Okay, I have one question for you, though, Mr. Hirsch. If Mitchell Trubisky, for some reason, is not the guy and can't get it done, who behind him is the guy? You got Chase Daniels, Tyler Bray. Say God forbid that he gets hurt.
Won me a ton of money this week, by the way.
Was that?
Chase Daniels won me a ton of money this week, by the way.
Good, you can take me to lunch. No, but if Trubisky, God forbid, he gets hurt even, what do they have? Why? They have a favorable schedule with a question mark. Compared to the Vikings, they do have they open up against Green Bay on the road, but after that, Seattle, Arizona, Tampa Bay, Miami. Until it's week 7 when they hit New England. Then they have the Jets, Buffalo, Detroit. They hit Minnesota in week 11. Detroit again, Giants, Rams in week 14. Green Bay, week 15.
That is one of the reasons why. So I'm gonna do this in two parts. One of the reasons why, and thank you, Blaine, for bringing up the schedule again, because I know we talked about that. the fact that you guys, I guess I'm talking to Mr. Hirsch when I say you guys, but the NFC North has the AFC East in their schedule this year. That already puts them at various wins over everybody else. Now, what I want to ask you is, so I know that you guys are not fantasy players and aren't other people and aren't analytic people and want to do just real football, rah 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 rah. But the reality is numbers matter, in the fact that you have to look at numbers in reality. As far as like I mentioned earlier, okay, there's only 400 targets that a quarterback can throw, so you can't pick 5 people to have 100 or 200 targets, right? So that's an obvious stupid thing to say. But what I want to ask you guys, and I want to bring Mr. Hirsch back into this, so we'll go to Blaine first, and then we'll go to Mr. Hirsch. There's going to be 10 teams that get to go to the playoffs, right? And I mentioned the fact that I think that the AFC North might have 3 teams there. Number one is, thanks to you, Baltimore Blaine, is the fact that you guys get to play the Jets, Dolphins, Bills. Every team gets to play them in the AFC North. So even though it seems easy to say, I don't think there's going to be 3 teams. Who's going to be better? No one in the AFC, right? Okay, sorry, Baltimore Blaine. Don't have a cardiac arrest. Let's say the Ravens are okay. Okay. Let's say maybe you guys came at me and saying the Chargers are going to win, but do you really feel super confident about anyone in the AFC West? Not really. AFC North, you guys are on record as saying is AFC East, the Patriots, right? AFC South, who? The Colts, the Titans, the Jags, maybe. Now we're at 3 teams, right? On the other side in the AFC. Now in the NFC, which
hold it. You lost me. What? I don't understand what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, name 7 other teams that are better than the teams in the AFC North, or NFC North, excuse me. Name other teams that are going to finish better than the Vikings, Packers, and either of the other 2 teams that are left when the NFC North gets to play the AFC East on their schedule.
Well, I'm still confused because it doesn't matter who's better for 4 of the teams, because if you win the division, you're in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's going to be you guys. That's going to be Aaron Rodgers and you,
I don't know who it's going to be, but then so instead of 7 other teams, you're asking for 2 other teams that are better than because there's going to be division winners in every division and two wild cards.
Explain it to him, please.
Okay. I think what you're saying is, since the NFC North is playing the AFC East, or these AFC teams, which of the AFC teams are better than the AFC North teams?
There you go.
Okay, and that's going to determine the ticket to the postseason. Well, you got New England. You got arguably the Steelers and the Ravens. You have the
but the Steelers and the Ravens are not in the rotation for the NFC North.
Yeah, they are. They play them. The point I'm trying to make.
Oh, no, they're not. No, they're not, Chris. AFC North is not.
I apologize. AFC East is.
But AFC East.
The point I'm trying to make is that the Packers, Vikings, Bears, and Lions are better than 22 other teams in the NFL, in my opinion.
I think that what you're leaving out, though, is the NFC South, and and how many teams are better than them.
But the NFC South, Remember last year when we all thought that Tampa Bay was going to do great? I disagree with you 150%. I think the Vikings, the Packers, and the Lions are better than everyone except the Saints.
Well, we'll just have to agree to disagree because I don't think the Lions are better than most teams out there, and I don't think, and as I've already gone on record as saying, I think the Vikings take a step back with what I'm seeing right now.
All right, well, we've done as much as we can. We have about 10 minutes left. So let's turn it over to our good friend, our fellow cheesehead. I guess he's the only cheesehead. We're the wannabe cheesehead.
But let's not forget the Lions.
Yeah, we talked about the Lions a bit, and they're going to be okay.
No, we didn't really. We didn't talk about the Lions, and we didn't talk about their coaching, and we didn't talk about their
Okay,
lack of a
let's
defense.
talk about the Lions.
It'll be quick.
Carry on, my wayward son. Carry on, Johnson is the next superstar in NFL.
Go, Blaine.
Okay. My questions on the Lions is new coaching staff. That's the biggest thing. How effective is this coach? How will the team respond to this coach? And will this team take a step back because of the new system and the new coach? I already stated earlier that this team has to get a defense running that is at least equitable to the offense. And they've got to stop relying on Matt Stafford's arm. It's the same thing as what happens if Matt Stafford goes down.
Carry on.
Right? I mean, you got Matt Castle and Jake Ruda.
You know,
there you go. Put Teddy Bridgewater in the mix there.
You could say that about any team. I mean, what happens if Flacco goes down? What happens if Rodgers goes down? You know, well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
I know you're high on RG3, but you know, I'm not going there. And
thanks for the setup.
And so every time we talk about a team, you chime in. What if the main quarterback goes down? Well, guess what? Any team in the NFL, if the main quarterback goes down, they're in serious trouble.
Except the Eagles last year, who won the Super Bowl.
Well, Mark, and the Vikings, but those are freak occurrences.
Mark, go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish up.
I mean, you know what if the whole team goes down? You know, like it happens to the Ravens all the time. You know,
and Aaron Rodgers.
Touche.
There's just nothing. There's nothing that you could say to that. That's a non sequitur. You know.
So let me explain.
Anytime anybody says anything, you can make that argument.
Let me explain my point of view. I mean, my point.
But that's the second team in a row that you've raised that argument. So I'm
gonna raise it every time, Mark, because if you're relying, this team relies on the quarterback. Do they have a running game, a decent running game? Maybe, but that's what everybody's going to be keying off on. If Roethlisberger goes down, you got Le'Veon Bell and company still to contend with, and you have you may have a decent quarterback that can keep them running. Are they going to go all the way with that quarterback? Probably not, but at least they'll be competitive. What do you have on the Lions that's going to make you competitive when this quarterback doesn't? If this quarterback can't haul everybody on his back? That's my point. It's every team. You're right. Every team you can say this about, but some teams are more vulnerable than other teams. This team does not have a defense. They have maybe an adequate running game.
Yeah, Mark, take that.
Not really. They didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher last year. I mean, the highest rusher was Blunt, who had 766 yards. They don't score a lot of touchdowns with the running backs.
Look at Blaine doing his research.
I mean, that's just my point. I mean, you're right. You can say that about any team, but just certain teams that are just, as soon as that quarterback is not there, boom, they're done.
Yeah, exactly. But and guess what? I'm picking Detroit to be at the bottom of the division.
Possibly.
So Yeah, I think that's going to happen unless, barring something unforeseen. I'm making what I say based on what they have as of today. And there's no way of knowing whether Stafford's going to go down or Tom Brady's going to go down or Flacco's going to go down or, any of the rest of that stuff. But based on the team coming into the season, I think the Lions are the runts of the litter. I think their new coach, who comes over from New England, I think that he comes out of a scheme where Bill Belichick was, holding everyone else down. He kept the other coaches in their positions, and he ran the show. And I don't know if Patricia's going to be able to run the show over there in Detroit. And they got a lot of changes going there. And there's not a big track record of Bill Belichick coordinators being big successes as head coaches. And so
true.
And then Chicago's got a new coach who's seems like he's good. He's not an old school guy, So yeah, I see the Lions are going to be at the bottom of the division based on what they have now.
So real quick, just with the name, I'm gonna ask both of you guys, so I can try and prove my point. You're a Packer fan, right? As the Packers, do you want to play Matt Stafford in his 10th year with Golden Tate, Galladay, Marvin Jones, Carry On My Wayward Son, all those guys, or do you want to play Arizona? Arizona, right?
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see how.
Do you want to play the Washington Redskins, or do you want to play Matt Nagy and the Bears in Soldier Field?
What is your point?
Point being is I think that the AFC North is better than all the rest of the teams that you could possibly play. Do you want to play Tampa Bay?
The AFC North is better.
NFC North. NFC North is better than, I think, almost anyone in the NFC. Like Tampa Bay, half their team is suspended for the first 4 games. Do you want to play them?
But nobody's arguing with you. The only thing that we argued with you about is whether there's going to be 3 teams from the NFC North that are going to the playoffs.
That's the point I'm making. I'm trying to give all the other teams that could possibly go to the playoffs. Anyways, something for a different day. Mr. Hurst, let's get to the Packers.
Well, I think it's
every single year you guys are picked to win the Super Bowl or go far in the playoffs. And it's been 10 years since you guys went to the Super Bowl. So what's different this year?
Well, for one thing, Dom Capers is gone.
And I agree with that.
And that's the thing that really has hurt the Packers over the long term is their lack of a solid defense. I mean, where were the Packers defenses ending up being ranked in the high 20s over and over and over again? And you cannot excel when you're playing catch-up ball or you're losing a comfortable lead because all of a sudden your defense collapses and the other team's scoring every time they get the ball. And this is what's been happening to the Packers over and over again. The offense put up plenty of points to win, and it was always the defense that let them down. And I think it's a new day. There's a new sheriff in town. I think Mike Pettine's got the right idea. I think that we got some great guys that came out of the draft class. I think the offense has done nothing but improve. I didn't see Jordy Nelson doing anything spectacular for the Raiders in the last preseason game, but the Packers have picked up Graham. It looks good for the Packers, but it's going to be a shootout between them and the Vikings. The Vikings have an excellent team too. It's going to depend, I think, who's going to be at the top of the division between the Packers and the Vikings is going to be the outcome of the 2 head-to-head games that they have with each other. I think that's going to tell the story, and that's going to give somebody the number. And if they split them, then it's going to be how they do against their opponents. And I think the Packers ended up getting a much weaker schedule than the Vikings did. They play, of course, the people in their own division, but aside from that, they've got the Redskins on September 23rd. Next week, the Bills. Out of the AFC West, they got the 49ers and the Rams, and those could be tough games. Fouled up by the Patriots, but then they got the Dolphins and then the Seahawks. Who knows? We're going to all have to see how the Seahawks are coming. But then they play the Cardinals and the Jets, but also the Falcons. So I think the Packers have an easier schedule out of their division than the Vikings do. They don't have to play New Orleans. They do have the game with the Bills. They do have the game with the Jets. They got the game with the Redskins. What else could you ask for? So
you're proving my point. Blaine, jump on in. But
your point is over, Chris.
I think that you guys have the best schedule, and I think there's no one that can even mess with the Vikings and the Packers going to 12 wins. I don't think there's any team that's even close. I think you guys are the obvious winners of the league this year.
Okay, Chris, but who's that third team out of this division that's going to make the playoffs between the Lions and the Bears?
Lions.
We're just stop it, you guys.
My question to you, Mark.
Let's just hold our breaths and see how many teams from the NFC North end up in the playoffs.
We're not trying to jinx you. Don't worry.
No, that's not the point. It's just it's not feasible mathematically.
So my question, that sets up my question though. Out of your schedule, in your division, which teams do you think you can sweep?
Well, I think we could sweep the Lions and the Bears. And
Okay.
I think it's possible that we could sweep the Vikings.
Okay. So if that were to happen, and I agree with you. Even though I think the Vikings will probably be a split. But the Bears and the Lions, I can see you sweeping. And if that's the case, I don't see a third team coming out of that division, Chris. But
yeah, because the Vikings are going to sweep the Bears and the Lions as well.
True. I can see that. So my follow-up question to that, my next question to you, Mark, is who is going to back up Aaron Rodgers? Who do you think is going to come out as the top backup? And are you going to keep three quarterbacks?
Well, all I could say is, God, I hope it doesn't come to that. And I'm fearful of that because watching the preseason, Brett Hundley looked pretty good. But I absolutely do not want to see him leading the team during the regular season. And the coaches are always high on him. They kept him around. They should have gave him the boot after last year. He was so bad at his backup role. He should have been gone and find somebody else. But no, they have to keep the guy. And now he's looking good in the preseason. And Kaiser comes in the last quarter when the Packers started with their second and third string offensive line in there. And by the time Kaiser comes in, the line is gassed. He's under attack constantly, and he looks really bad and doesn't get a chance to show anything. And so it looks like Hundley all the way. And it's like, oh, please, God, no.
But do you think you're going to keep three quarterbacks?
Well, I hope so. Because I would like to see some options available if, God forbid, something happens to Aaron Rodgers and Hundley comes out and starts stinking up the joint. Next man up, please.
See, now your team is one of the teams that I look at and I say they could still be, depending on if Brett Hundley has Well, as you know, if he's improved, Deshaun Kaiser, I all the way back with the Browns, I don't have faith in him. Um, Never mind. But
Blaine, I have to tell you, I don't even want to have the word Hundley enter my consciousness. I do not want to, and for right now, I'm thinking Aaron Rodgers. Until something happens to change that situation, I don't want to even think about Brett Hundley. And you'll have to take note of the fact that very early on in the show, I said the best place for Teddy Bridgewater was number 2 to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah,
and
That's super sharp, actually.
And I think he could learn something in that position, and that it could help him a lot. And but please don't say the H word.
and that's something that people need to understand. Like I'm not a Green Bay hater. Like I understand that Aaron Rodgers has the excuse me, the highest passer rating in history. I understand that, but he's only been to one Super Bowl, and his biggest advocate on this show, Mr. Hirsch, always talks about, well, what has he done? How has he won? And he hasn't. And the fact that he's hurt almost all the time. And as much as people want to defend that, and I'm definitely not coming at Hirsch. When you're hurt every other year, I don't know what to tell you. You're hurt every other year, and when you're hurt, you had Mike Flynn, Hundley, and then in the season when you have the best quarterback in history, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers, you watch the Eagles lose an MVP candidate and win with someone that all of us hated except for Mr. Hirsch as the backup quarterback. I don't know. So
well,
tell me,
I come from a team that has a history of having great quarterbacks, and I spotted something in Nick Foles a long time ago, and he did have an off year or two, but the Eagles were lucky to have him. But Brett Hundley is no Nick Foles, and he's no Case Keenum. And if Rodgers breaks his collarbone again, he's going to end up in the broadcasting booth. What can I say? All I can do is hope that he's healthy, and I do, and we'll see what happens. But I'm excited about the Packers defense. And just to answer your question, Aaron Rodgers put up the numbers, he did everything, and he led the team forward into the playoffs, which is something that Kirk Cousins never did with the Redskins. And it was always the defense. The defense was terrible. And I've been saying it for years on here that the Packers need a defense. And if they had that's you talk about the Seahawks and going to the Super Bowl, they had the best defense there was. Life is easy when the other team doesn't have a lot of points on the board, no matter who you are, whether you're Aaron Rodgers or Matt Stafford or Russell Wilson. There's nothing more pleasurable to a quarterback than having a defense that can stop the other side from putting up points. And that when you manage to get ahead, they can keep the other side from scoring. And that's what the Packers have lacked. And I don't blame Aaron Rodgers for that. I blame management for keeping that dinosaur capers.
Now, Mr. Hirsch, you're staying with the injury issue. How is that offensive line?
Well, the offensive line is the only question mark on the team. And they've been working their second and third string guys. Brian Bulaga, I question if he's got another season in him. He's a great big guy. Those guys are big and heavy. They should have never let TJ Lang go. The offensive line's a question mark. I'm not worried about David Bakhtiari. I think he's going to be okay. The offensive line is a question mark, but I think, I guess we'll see about that. I think that they've got some pieces in place that may not be stellar, but I think will be adequate. And it's a good thing that Aaron Rodgers is mobile.
Well, I like Muhammad Wilkerson on that line. Well, I'm sorry, that's on the defensive line anyway. I think that adds to your defense. I think that was a great addition. I think the defense is solid. I'm looking at your schedule here, and this should be a crime. The way that your schedule starts off, the way this schedule starts off, it's a possibility this team could be 6-0 before the bye. They're going to have a bye at week 7, but they're playing. You open up hosting Chicago, you host Minnesota, you go to Washington,
Packers
then you host
Jags
Buffalo, Detroit. I mean, you're at Detroit and you host San Francisco.
Yeah,
that could be 6-0.
We're gonna talk about this later on, but all of you Jimmy Garoppolo fans, don't forget that he did win the last 4 games of the season for the Niners, but he had 7 touchdowns and 5 picks, and so far in the preseason he has 3 picks and 2 touchdowns. So
are you saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to lose a game?
Yeah, no, the Packers are gonna maul him. I'll bet the house on that. I'll smash the bank. The Packers
can only hope.
Call him. If Aaron Rodgers is in there, because Aaron Rodgers is not a very nice person, but he's a super talented guy, and he will show Jimmy Garoppolo what it is to be an actual quarterback, and he will maul that
guy. I hope so.
That was my sexy pause for you, boy.
Did you want to go, Chris?
No, he's taking a hit at you because you're liking the 49ers.
I know.
I think that, we'll talk about, hopefully we'll get some chance to talk about the NFC West. But I think the 49ers are going to definitely finish first or second, Seahawks third, and Cardinals in the last position.
No.
Keep us in suspense, Mr. Hirsch. Keep us in suspense.
I love that you said that, and I think that the 49ers are going to be good in 2 or 3 years. What was that? Man, I want to give him credit, but I forgot his name. They said he is 1 year away from being 1 year away. He did not do that well. He got what people don't realize is that the 49ers' strength is not Jimmy Garoppolo, it's their defense. And that's the reason why they won the last few games. Jimmy Garoppolo had a passer rating of 78 in his last few games, but everyone gives him the credit, even though
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm sorry. Folks, you got to wait for the NFC West show.
There you go.
Well, so I'm going to play the role of the optimist here, and I think that I'm going to call the NFC North Packers, Vikings, Bears, Lions.
I'm going to go along with you on the first 2 picks. I think I'm still going to flip those last 2, though. So that's my only difference with you there.
Folks, just so you know, next week we're going to do our first is it next week or the week after? Soon. We're going to do the first of Knucklehead Podcast Network pick'em shows. And this year I actually have contracted a actual company that's going to put all of us, Shane McGowan, Luis, Mark Mancini, the 3 of us, we're all going to do, and maybe a few others, we're going to actually have a pick'em show so I can win again and show you guys why I win. And what I'm going to win is going to say that I think that the Vikings, the Packers, and the Lions are better than 90% of the rest of the teams in the NFL.
Oh
That's
my
it.
gosh.
I know. This is my first pick of the season, and I think it's gonna actually happen. Obviously, injuries, can do whatever they're gonna do, but I think that they're gonna do it. And for those of you who want to, I want to give out some love to some of the other podcasts that I really like. The fantasy footballers, the Foot Clan. One of the guys on that show who is number 3 as the most accurate projector of points in the entire world for the NFL for the last 2 years in a row. He has a drop, and I want to aspire to this, where he loves On Johnson so much that he has a drop where it goes from that 70s song, Mr. Hirsch, because I can picture you singing this. Carry on my wayward son.
Can we cut to commercial?
You know what? Maybe you can picture it, but I don't think you've ever heard me singing. And I wish I hadn't. I wish I hadn't heard you.
Yeah, I'm
intended,
awful.
but
I am so awful. You know what? We're gonna get out of here. At Nuck Pods, KNUCK Pods. Follow us on Twitter as well as on Facebook, and you can email us if you want us to talk about a subject at nuckpods@gmail.com. Hopefully, Mr. Mark Hirsch will get off of his Angels deal so we can all have a great time and do the stuff that we've done for years and years and years on Tuesdays, and have a great time on the live show, which you guys can email into. I just want to say, and Mark Hirsch, tell me if you know this. I found a show. I have 29 seconds. I have a song in my head from 1969 called Sundown from Gordon Lightfoot. Do you know that?
You better take care with those.
You better take care if I find you coming around my back stairs. Sundown, you better take care. Don't worry, folks. I will never sing again. I love you
Gordon
guys.
Lightfoot.
I love
Gordon
Lightfoot. I love you guys
The
so much.
Canadian.
And I promise I will never. Now I hate the song because he's Canadian. But I promise I will never sing again.
I love that song.
Blaine, better take care. Good night.